Hi, my name is Ananya, and I'll be presenting our paper on behalf of my co-authors, Who Speaks Matter, analyzing the influence of the speaker's ethnicity on hate speech classification. We've seen in recent literature that LLMs are being used as classifiers of hate speech, and we've also seen that as classifiers, these LLMs are pretty accurate. And one of the biggest advantages of this is that it makes content moderation easy. However, in these examples, the pipeline always exists with the statement and the LLM predicting whether it is hateful or not. But what if we were to add an identity to this? Would the LLM still predict similarly? More succinctly, are LLMs robust and equitable to all possible linguistic identities? To study this, let's take an example. If I tell him who looks like a monkey, I'll probably get banned. When we provide this identity both implicitly and explicitly, we take one as a Singaporean identity, and for the same statement, both in the same setting of implicit and explicit, we take an African American identity. To inject the explicit markers, we simply just add the linguistic identity very explicitly within the sentence. For example, the Singaporean person said XYZ, or the Jamaican person said XYZ. However, to inject the implicit markers, we need to be able to use dialected data, specifically dialected English data for the linguistic identity. Hence, the pipeline that we use is we use a linguistic identity, we use the statement, we pass it through a Llama 3.8b model, which has been prompted using a few-shot prompting technique to be able to ask it to generate specific identity without modifying the context. We then verify this with human intervention. We use human annotators to verify this, and we see that produce the following data, which contains non-context changing, code switched, or dialected data, which contains few references to or few clues, implicit clues to the user's identity, that of Singaporean or Jamaican. In this case, now our pipeline, when we pass this data through an LLM speech classifier, we then check whether it predicts not hateful or hateful. What we observe is that the model for specifically the Jamaican implicit identity, which was initially predicted as not hateful, now predicts it as hateful. We then test 4 models. We test Hate Explain Bot, Llama 3.8b, Llama 370b, and GPT-4o. We test against 2 settings, zero-shot and in-context learning, and test against 5 linguistic identities that of African American, British, Indian, Jamaican, and Singaporean. We choose these identities because they have a considerably strong English-speaking population. As results, we see that larger models are often robust against explicit markers as compared to smaller models. We also see that specifically ethnicity or identity specific results, that certain identities, for example, in Hate to Explain, Indian, African American, and Singaporean have a much higher flip change of hateful to not hateful. And in certain cases, the American and Jamaican identity has a much higher rate from not hateful to hateful. So a lot of times these percentage of flips are based on the ethnicity that we are giving. We also see that within implicit categories, between hateful to not hateful, there is a higher change in hateful to not hateful flips than there are not hateful to hateful flips. That is, when a sentence comes as a hateful sentence, it is likely to be shifted in most models except Llama 3.8b. We also see that except Llama 3.8b, models are more susceptible and show a higher percentage of flips in the implicit categories rather than the explicit categories. Lastly, we compare the zero-shot and ICL techniques and see that ICL is only slightly lesser than the flips shrink only by a small amount as compared to zero-shot, but in most cases, they remain rather the same. Finally, we're able to see that models are sensitive to the ethnicity of the speaker. The robustness of the model varies with the model size, where the bigger the model, the better the model, the lesser the model flips. The type of the model marker that is, it will be less robust to implicit or dialected data than compared to explicit data, where in some ways it's able to identify the identity. The type of hate, we see that most the type of hate or the type of sentence, we see most initially hatefully predicted sentences are likely to turn to non-hateful, which possesses which is not good, because in a content moderation pipeline, this is the sentence that are likely to be false negatives and then pass away. We see ethnicity. A lot of these flips are ethnicity specific, where identities such as Indian, Jamaican, and African American are likely to flip from one to the other. We also see from hateful to not hateful. We also see prompting technique doesn't matter that much, where ICL shows only slightly better performance or slightly more robust performance as compared to zero shot. Lastly, this brings this need for models to be trained on large scale dialected data. Thank you.